everybody. Welcome to Growing Up 2000s, a podcast about the weird and wonderful world of 2000s nostalgia. From Millsbury to Toon Disney to everything in between. I'm your host, Christopher Burrows, and I'm delighted to be with you for the very first episode of Growing Up 2000s. We've got a great episode planned for you today. We're going to be talking about Cartoon Network and touch on a little bit of Boomerang, but we're going to be doing mostly Cartoon Network and looking at the thousands era of this beloved children's channel. We'll have a special panelist on today, my friend Rowan, who's going to be talking about what Cartoon Network meant to him. And before we get there, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Cartoon Network and also about my own personal experience with the channel growing up. My interest in Cartoon Network began rather early. I was obsessed with Scooby-Doo growing up. I had a Scooby-Doo lunchbox, and I regularly packed Scooby snacks, those delicious fruit snacks, which you always begged your parents to get you. But in addition, I also had the experience of growing up with quite a few of Cartoon Network shows. For example, one of these was Baby Looney Tunes, and in fact, right before I would go to school in the morning, we would have Baby Looney Tunes and Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries. And both of these shows were really special, I think, because they're innocent, they're carefree, they're fun, and there was just something magical about I would pop the tape in, tape it right as I was about to leave for school, and then I would come back home excited to watch both of these shows. My memory's a little foggy around that time, but I can tell you I remember that Baby Looney Tunes aired around 9 o'clock and Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries aired around 9:30. As I got older, Cartoon Network continued to play an important part in my life. The CN Fridays intro you saw there, I watched quite a bit of the Cartoon Network Fridays programming block, watching shows like Atomic Betty and Duck Dodgers. As you can see, Cartoon Network was an important part of my childhood. Coming up, you'll see how Cartoon Network played a large role in Rowan's childhood, and as we'll be discussing some of the shows that he watched growing up and why they were important to him. To talk about Cartoon Network today, I'm delighted to welcome Rowan, who is one of my classmates at West Chester University. How are you today, Rowan?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thanks. Thanks for joining today. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself so we get to know you a little bit?
Great. So I'm at West Chester University. I'm a literature major, English literature. So I'm also working on my own podcast because we're doing this project together, kind of, and that's Out of Space, Plenty of Time. So I'll have my own link, I suppose.
I'll put a link down in the description. And it sounds really amazing. Like I love the title of it. It sounds like it's going to be a fun podcast. What's your topic? What is it going to be about?
So my podcast is going to be about relating science fiction technology to real life. So each episode is going to be like a different setting because as a background, I'm going to have like Foley work to make the podcast feel like it's a lived-in podcast, like on a spaceship or whatever.
Sounds amazing. I'll probably check it out when you have it done. I'll definitely be interested in checking that out. So today, I am excited to talk about Cartoon Network with you, a channel that has changed a lot since the 2000s, and since the topic of this podcast is all about nostalgia for the 2000s, all about shows that were important to you. We'll have a montage coming up later of several people mentioning shows that were really important to them. What Cartoon Network shows would you say were most important to you growing up?
I'd say one of the main contenders would be the original Teen Titans, Samurai Jack, Powerpuff Girls, Dexter's Laboratory, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and Ed, Edd and Eddy, among several others.
What about those shows do you think makes them so memorable? What do you think really stood out to you and made them important parts of your childhood?
Well, what got me going back to watch them over and over again is there was always something different. And especially with Teen Titans, there was like a huge story arc that was going on. And there was a lot at stake. And the characters were also very likable. And I was looking forward to seeing like what would happen or how they would react to certain situations. And also the art style.
You actually you said you named your cat after, or you wanted to name your cat after one of the characters in Teen Titans. I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, so we had a cat in my dad's apartment growing up, and he was named Beast because I liked Teen Titans that much.
Was Beast Boy your favorite character? I know you said you liked all of them. Was he your favorite?
I'd say it's a toss-up between Beast Boy and Raven. I just think they're so unique, and I especially like their powers, like being able to transform into anything versus being able to conjure up any kind of physical object.
Did you ship them? I mean, I know a lot of people, a lot in the fandom wanted Beast Boy and Raven as a couple. Some people would rather have Beast Boy and Terra. Did you actually, were you interested in that kind of thing watching the show, or that didn't matter to you at all?
I actually heard about that because I was doing some research for this podcast beforehand, and that's a thing that people were kind of passionate about, but like not really. Like as a kid, I was just watching the show for the action pretty much.
I think Teen Titans is just, I mean, it's an amazing show. Like you look back on it, and it's a couple years ago. Like I think it started 2003. I want to say the original run was like 2003 to 2007, somewhere around that range. And looking back at these action sequences, I mean, they're so polished. They really, I mean, they rival a lot of live action movies even today of what they were able to accomplish. And I think animation does have that flexibility as a medium where if you can draw it, you can imagine it, you can do it. And I think Teen Titans holds up so well, largely because those story arcs that you mentioned, and because the animation is still so crisp, and I think the characters are so likable and memorable. But of course, Teen Titans has gone through some changes recently. It's morphed into something a little bit different from the original Teen Titans, and we've had Teen Titans Go, which occupies a lot of today's Cartoon Network schedule. What are your thoughts on Teen Titans Go as a fan of the original Teen Titans, and how would you contrast the two shows?
Yeah, the biggest contrast I see between them is the animation, because the you mentioned the original was like really crisp. The animation was always smooth. There was a lot of detail in it, a lot of polish. And Teen Titans Go, it's that cookie cutter animation design of things being like very flat in 2D. So that's one problem I have with it. And then another problem are all the characters just seem different. Like they're not the same people. They're just, it's written by someone else clearly.
And it's weird because they actually, this is one of those things where, unlike the Powerpuff Girls reboot, they actually got a lot of the original voice cast on board. And I have to wonder what the original voice cast thinks of having these characters change so different, having to play them so differently than when they did it in the original show. Kind of along that line, kind of making some broader comparisons here, how would you contrast not only Teen Titans with Teen Titans Go, but the Cartoon Network that you grew up with versus the Cartoon Network of today?
Um, well, it's the same thing that happened to Teen Titans happened to a lot of other shows as well. I think I've seen a lot of good shows go away, but a lot of newer Cartoon Network shows have that, I guess, template of being a sitcom show with animated characters. So you'll see a lot of very similar characters in that same like path of animation and storytelling.
What do you think made the characters of, and the shows especially of the 2000s, you mentioned like how different each of them was. How do you think they were able to distinguish themselves from each other, especially as opposed to, as you said, now that we have a lot of these, in your opinion, these animated sitcoms? How was it different, do you think, in the 2000s?
I think a lot of shows were appealing to very narrow demographics, and at the same time, there were so many different shows that you were able to appeal to many different people. Like the protagonists of each show, like there were even mute protagonists in some shows, like Courage the Cowardly Dog. So you'll get a lot of different personalities and a lot of different art styles as well.
What art style do you think, other than Teen Titans, because Teen Titans is absolutely beautiful, what art style outside of Teen Titans would you say was most appealing to you?
I think one of the most eye-catching was Samurai Jack because all the characters are always like very small, but the background and the settings were so grand and unique. And also going back to like the more basics, Ed, and Eddy was eye-catching to me because of how lively it was. like nothing was ever static. If a character was standing still, they had like 2 or 3 different frames of them that would just run through over and over again. So everything was like kind of jittery and always rumbling, I guess.
It has a sort of raw quality, I feel like, of it. That is sort of like almost like a hand-drawn quality of the animation that I think makes it entirely unique even now. And I think especially what's interesting about Samurai Jack is that the creator of Samurai Jack, Genndy Tartakovsky, has done so many different animation styles. You think of Dexter's Laboratory, Powerpuff Girls, and even the late great Symbionic Titan, which got canceled after only 1 season. That's a whole other story for a different day. But they're all such different styles, and all. I mean, it's amazing how much he was able to make work. And on that topic, what do you think? Even just a general feel of the channel. What do you think really worked about old Cartoon Network? And are there some things that you think about today's Cartoon Network that are better or different than Thousands Cartoon Network?
I think the original 2000s Cartoon Network was all about contrast and having unique shows. And although newer Cartoon Network shows don't have a whole lot of individuality, there's still a lot of character. Like going back to Adventure Time, that has such like a flowing animation style, and it's very colorful, a lot of like neon colors in there. And also the regular show, I think like there's still a lot of character there to be seen, but there's a lot of other shows that don't really appeal to me, or probably wouldn't appeal to most kids that have my mindset.
And what do you think that mindset is as far as like why certain shows don't appeal to you, and which ones in particular do you think are particularly unappealing shows to you?
I'd say I had a really short attention span watching those shows, so I've always wanted something to be happening in the background, as well as having animation that's not just like very flat and 2D, people walking around on a very like level surface, because that's what 16 is, that's what Total Drama Island is, that's Johnny Test. Like I don't remember the characters of Johnny Test because of how unique they are. I remember them because of how annoying they are. So that's the biggest difference, I think, between those two different kinds of shows.
And what do you say? I mean, you talk about like how much action, how much movement there was in old Cartoon Network shows. How would you compare that? Like it seems as though Cartoon Network of the major kids channels available to you at the time, in contrasting with Nickelodeon, Disney, even PBS. It seems like Cartoon Network was one of the most important ones to you, or if not the most important one to you, the one that you spent most time with. How would you contrast Cartoon Network and what made it special to you as opposed to watching Nickelodeon or Disney? Why would you opt to watch Cartoon Network instead of Nickelodeon, for example?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of Nick shows, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's just whatever I saw first kind of stuck with me. And going back to Teen Titans, like that was such a unique thing because it's like the superhero aspect of it. There are these grand scope battles where people are flying through buildings and all that kind of stuff. And there's a gritty animation style where there's like dust particles going up and stuff. And contrasting that with the Nick shows that were most popular, or what I saw at the time, was just like it was very goofy, contrasting to the Cartoon Network shows that I watched.
I'm thinking even Teen Titans and Courage the same way, where Courage, it was a dark comedy, but it also had quite a bit of horror elements in it. And I think that definitely, and even some episodes like Hunchback of Nowhere, which are incredibly touching, that like, these shows had so much range, I feel like, on what they were able to express, the kinds of emotions they were able to go for. And speaking of some of those old shows, if you could bring a show back, like, and you could bring back the voice cast, you could bring back the directors, the writers, everything, what would you bring back and why?
I think you already know the answers. Is Teen Titans, definitely. I just want to see more of those characters. I want like a larger arc, and I guess I don't know if it's like PC to kill off characters in a kids show, but I feel like that's something that could actually happen because the stakes felt so huge in that show comparing with like the lightheartedness and goofiness of other channels like Nickelodeon and Disney.
Where do you think a Teen Titans arc would go for you in terms like what would you do with the characters? Would you age them? Would you like maybe like have them go to college, or like where would you put the Teen Titans characters now?
That's a really interesting question because, of course, the title's Teen Titans, so you kind of lose that alliteration if you did any kind of progression with their age, but you kind of have to at this point. If you're going to bring back the same voice casts, like they will sound different no matter how well they try to encapsulate the previous characters.
I think on that point of like of shows that were really important and shows that you would bring back, Cartoon Network had so many popular shows. I think of the Powerpuff Girls. I think of Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, that had huge audiences. But not every show on Cartoon Network had a huge following. As an avid Cartoon Network watcher yourself, was there a show that you felt, or it might have even been a show that was somewhat popular, people didn't seem to love it, it was never anyone's favorite show. Was there ever a show that you felt was sort of under the radar, underrated, as a show that you think should have gotten more love, but never did?
Well, you did mention Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Like, I don't remember much, but I remember the music. And the music was so entertaining to me, even just like barely paying attention to what was happening on the screen. And then one other show that I want to add to the discussion is Flapjack. There's The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack is the full title, I think. You can correct me later in editing, I guess, if I'm wrong, but that it goes to the same point of having these really bizarre shows that are trying to cover more adult topics, but still being lighthearted.
It's interesting because the creator of Flapjack, I don't know if you're familiar with Gravity Falls, but Thurop Van Orman actually was a guest star on Gravity Falls as a voice actor. So I think that that's incredibly interesting that he still stayed involved with the animation even after Flapjack. You know, and in closing today, I was curious also to know, and maybe I'll do a different question, and I don't want to end on a negative, of a show that you hated growing up. I think I can kind of guess this too, based on what we've talked about so far, but a show that you really hated when it came on, you're thinking, I got to turn the channel, I can't do this.
Yeah, I mean, I've been rambling a lot about Johnny Test. I'm not sure how much of that was on the recording or how much, but yeah, it's just such an annoying show. Like, I'm not sure why I watched so much of it. I think it's probably because of what you said, like there were marathons of it constantly. It's just no one was likable. Like, if you have a protagonist that isn't likable, you have to have likable side characters for them to bounce off of. But in that show, everyone was just annoying. Like, it was just hard to listen to, hard to watch.
And I guess here, I think that this would be an interesting question to sort of wrap up our conversation about nostalgia and Cartoon Network. There's been a lot of questions over the schedule of Cartoon Network. I know you brought up, for example, that they added live action shows to the schedule in the late 2000s, and people wondering why are they doing that? And also the idea that they favor certain shows too much in the schedule. We see things like Teen Titans Go and Amazing World of Gumball on a lot, and other shows relatively little. Especially older cartoons like Tom and Jerry and Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, don't seem to have as much of a presence on the channel as they did when we were growing up. What would you do if you were in charge of Cartoon Network scheduling? What do you think would be a good balance on the strike between nostalgia and new content, especially with the context of streaming services being available and that they have to remain relevant as a cable channel?
Right. I think we talked about this earlier, the fact that streaming has become so popular, it's kind of putting cable channels in a rough position. But as far as a ratio to new content versus old content, I don't think you should show the same show more than like twice, probably. Like, I'm kind of opposed to marathons in general. And I think you should probably have like a quarter rerun content versus like 75% new stuff is just a rough estimate I have in my head.
Do you think it would be like a programming block? And Nickelodeon has experimented with the splat for old Nicktoons. Do you think it could be a programming block of like maybe like a 3-hour slot where they they go back to like a throwback, a Cartoon Network throwback, where they go back and revisit Courage and Eddy. Do you think that would work, or do you think that would get ratings because of nostalgia?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It just depends on like when that is, I suppose. I'm not an expert in programming, but I think just having a block of old shows, just like to have a time period reserved for those kinds of viewers would be a good idea.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Rowan, today. It's been great to chat about Cartoon Network. I know it's been an important channel for so many people growing up, and I think it's great to actually hear from someone who spent a lot of time with Cartoon Network and really it's really very important to you. So I appreciate that you took the time to come on today. As Rowan mentioned earlier, if you're interested in hearing his podcast, Out of Space, Plenty of Time, be sure to listen to that. I'll put a link to it in the description to the SoundCloud for that particular podcast. And I thank you again for coming on today, Ron. I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that stroll down memory lane with Rowan and me as we shared our favorite memories of Cartoon Network over the years. It's amazing to think how much has happened since Cartoon Network launched in 1992. We started out with very little original programming, to go into the cartoons like Dexter's Laboratory, the Powerpuff Girls, Sheep in the Big City, to Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and Chowder, and Flapjack, and so on. It's been an amazing ride over 28 years, and I'm interested to see where Cartoon Network goes in the next 28 years. Before we go today, I do have one special treat for the end of the show from my friend Fiona Short, who is sharing a Cartoon Network show that was important to her growing up. Thanks again for watching, and I hope I'll see you on the next episode.
For me, a show that was really important to me from my childhood would be the Powerpuff Girls, because even at a young age, like, it showed me that girls can be like heroes and cool and tough.